The quiet dread inherent in unresolved truth defines this exploration of investigations terminated without warning. There exists a unique category of official inquiry spanning jurisdictions and disciplines that shares a chilling commonality. They are not solved, nor are they defeated by lack of evidence. But rather, they are unilaterally stopped, choked off by an invisible administrative hand, just as the data begins to coalesce into critical, undeniable form. This document examines 5 such instances, inquiries that stretch across 2 decades and 3 continents, unified by the singular, unnerving outcome of sudden, official closure. The first file demanding examination concerns the deep water anomaly, designated internally as Project Siren's Call. This investigation took place across the vast, lightless expanse of the Pacific Abyssal Plain, thousands of meters beneath the churning surface waters. The mission, primarily funded through a consortium of oceanic monitoring institutes, was designed to track geophysical activity and catalog the complex bioacoustic environment of the Hadal Zone. For months, the array of highly sensitive hydrophones, anchored to the seabed by heavy ceramic weights, functioned exactly as expected, sending back the ambient symphony of seismic shifts, distant whale song, and the muffled scrape of deep-sea currents against the thermal stratification layers. Then, the routine fractured. On the 3rd week of the 3rd operational rotation, technician logs began registering an acoustic signature unlike any previously categorized event. It was not the broadband rumble of an earthquake or the rhythmic pulse of marine life. Instead, the signal presented as a complex, repeating series of tones, mathematically structured and exhibiting harmonics that suggested not chaos, but intent. The frequency range was unusual, sitting just above the typical low-frequency chatter of the deep, lending it a quality of sharp, crystalline intrusion into the otherwise viscous darkness. Initial automated analysis dismissed it as highly localized equipment interference, a transient artifact of the deep ocean environment. However, the signal persisted, looping with unnerving regularity every 4.6 minutes, a cycle that defied natural explanation. The dedicated analysis team, sequestered in a sound-dampened bunker far from the Pacific Rim, began manually cross-referencing the signal across the dozen active hydrophones. They used sophisticated filtering algorithms to strip away the environmental noise, the hiss of thermoclines, and the grinding friction of oceanic plates, leaving the core anomaly exposed. What remained was a series of structured bursts, exhibiting characteristics of deliberate encoding, a digital fingerprint pressed into the acoustic fabric of the abyssal plain. The volume was low initially, a barely perceptible thread, but the logs recorded the sound escalating steadily, intensity climbing day by day, as if the source were approaching the perimeter of the monitoring array, or perhaps powering up its transmission. An automated submersible, the Triton 8, a squat, reinforced vessel painted matte gray to absorb stray light, was rerouted immediately. Its mission was simple: follow the vector calculation provided by the triangulation software and attempt visual, magnetic, and direct acoustic capture of the source. The Triton 8 was slow, designed for endurance, not speed. Its movement measured in agonizing meters per hour across the silicate dust and ooze of the ocean floor. The anticipation in the command center was palpable, a tightly coiled spring of intellectual excitement mixed with professional caution. The projected intercept time was calculated at T-14 hours. The signal peaked at T-4 hours. The volume of the repeating tones became overwhelming, saturating the acoustic buffers of the monitoring system. The sound was no longer crystalline. It was visceral, a physically impacting resonance that vibrated the very structure of the surface command vessel. Analysts reported that the repeating sequence broke down into a frenetic, non-repeating pattern. a sequence of utterly chaotic noise, followed by an unnerving period of complete silence. An absolute dead zero in the hydrophone output, where there should have been the constant static of the deep. Hours before the automated submersible reached its destination, when it was still 4 hours away from the predicted point of origin, the entire hydrophone array suffered catastrophic failure. The logs, which had meticulously tracked every vibration, every current, and every pressure fluctuation for years, recorded only a sharp, violent burst of broadband static. Dalam sekejap, statis broadband menyambar, memancarkan kilatan putih yang memaksa insinyur itu mundur, sebelum seluruh ruangan diselimuti kegelapan total. All communication with the array vanished. The sophisticated pressure housings, designed to withstand crushing forces far greater than those encountered, had simply ceased to transmit. The Triton 8, programmed to wait for the conclusion of its search phase, was commanded to surface immediately. Within 24 hours of the static burst, an internal memorandum arrived from the supervising government agency. It was short, printed on heavy stock paper that lent it an unwarranted gravitas, and it cited prohibitive and unforeseeable operational costs stemming from the loss of equipment. The Deepwater Anomaly investigation was immediately halted. All recovered data logs, including the complex signature recordings and the final catastrophic static burst, were flagged and filed under Tier 3 classification, effectively rendering them inaccessible to the primary research team that had dedicated years to the project. The abruptness of the termination left a chilling void in the operational records, a stark, blank space where a potential breakthrough had been moments from realization. The Deepwater Anomaly remained buried under miles of water and layers of vague administrative decree. Next, we turn our attention east, crossing continents to the scorching expanse of the high plains of North America, for the examination of the Desert Cache investigation of the early 1990s. This case, codenamed Project Pale Shadow, unfolded in a blinding, sun-scorched corner of a desolate geological formation, a place defined by endless horizon, baked clay, and the ceaseless, dry wind that chafed the skin and silenced the landscape. The initial discovery was made by a small team of academic archaeologists from a regional university, specializing in pre-Columbian agricultural patterns. They were mapping subterranean water runoff when their ground-penetrating radar registered an anomaly. A deep, dense concentration of inorganic material, too regular to be natural rock intrusion. The subsequent excavation was slow, laborious work, requiring the precise removal of layers of compacted sediment and ancient wind-blown dust. The air shimmered with heat, and every movement was an effort against the crushing inertia of the environment. After weeks of patient digging, the team reached the source, a hidden cairn constructed from tightly interlocked slabs of a local dark basalt, completely concealed beneath centuries of accumulated earth. The stones were expertly fitted, showing no evidence of mortar, suggesting a level of engineering sophistication entirely unexpected for the regional timeline. The discovery itself was significant, pushing back the established date of complex local habitation by millennia. Inside the cairn, protected from the elements and the passage of time by the dense stone architecture, the researchers found not weaponry or common pottery, but sealed vessels. These were crafted from an unfamiliar, incredibly smooth, dark ceramic, baked at temperatures the archaeologists could not immediately reconcile with the known technology base. The surfaces of these vessels bore intricate symbols. These were not pictograms or standard ideograms. They were complex geometric tessellations and repeating linear patterns. Dr. Alastair Kincaid, the lead epigrapher, spent 72 hours in the field sketching and photographing them, concluding with professional certainty that the writing system was unrelated to any recorded historical culture, local, continental, or otherwise, found in any global database. The true breakthrough came when they carefully opened one of the sealed vessels. Inside, protected from moisture by a layer of fine calcined powder, were sheets of brittle, dark parchment. The material was paper-thin, dry to the touch, and surprisingly flexible, yet possessing a resilience that defied its age. Kincaid, working under the meager shade of a portable tent, used gentle magnification to analyze the text. The parchment contained continuous script, dense and flowing, structured by the same geometric symbols found on the vessels. Initial, agonizingly slow translation attempts, based on positional frequency and repetitive markers, hinted at material that, if true, would necessitate a profound historical realignment. The text spoke of migratory patterns that contradicted every accepted theory of continental settlement, and described celestial events observed and recorded with an astronomical precision that should have been impossible for any indigenous culture of the era. The discovery's importance was clear, demanding immediate, rigorous protection and expanded investigation. Kincaid sent a heavily encrypted preliminary report to the National Heritage Foundation at 0400 hours on a Tuesday. By 0900 hours the following morning, before the archaeological team had even finished excavating the third vessel, the administrative hammer fell. An unmarked governmental directive arrived via sealed courier driven by two individuals in heavy, nondescript utility vehicles. There was no departmental insignia on the paper, only a classified code number and a signature block representing an authority that transcended typical academic oversight. The directive was unambiguous: order the immediate cessation of all work. The language was curt, procedural, and entirely lacking in explanation. The research team, sweat-stained and covered in the dust of centuries, watched in stunned silence as the two anonymous agents who offered neither names nor badges began the process of termination. Heavy metallic fencing, prefabricated and specialized, was swiftly erected around the entire excavation perimeter. The site, rich with history and pregnant with unanswered questions, was sealed. The researchers, Dr. Kincaid included, were ordered to surrender all physical evidence: the recovered parchment, the sealed vessels, the field notebooks, and even the preliminary photographs, which were cataloged and placed into secure, opaque transit crates. The dedicated research team was left standing beside their abandoned excavation tools, the trowels leaning against the protective tarp, the brushes laid out neatly on the ground, the measuring tape still stretched across the partial outline of the hidden cairn. They were told to leave the area immediately, citing unspecified security risks and site contamination potential. The desert cache investigation vanished under the pall of official secrecy, the profound historical realignment it promised replaced by the blinding, sun-scorched silence of enforced closure. The fragile, dark parchment and its unsettling narrative were absorbed entirely by the bureaucracy, disappearing into the dark maw of the archive. The third focus shifts from the ancient earth and the deep ocean to the cold, bright geometry of global finance, the case designated as the Ghost of Sector 7. This was a complex financial inquiry launched by federal prosecutors into allegations of massive, systemic corporate malfeasance that threatened to destabilize international currency markets. The investigation focused on a specific, interconnected web of offshore holdings and shadow entities linked ultimately back to one major investment firm, Sterling and Thorne. Headquartered in a high-rise tower of polished steel and black glass in a major metropolitan center, the inquiry had stalled for 18 months, unable to pierce the intricate legal scaffolding erected by the firm's defense teams. The break came, as it often does in cases of such magnitude, not through diligent procedural discovery, but through conscience. An anonymous informant, later revealed to be a senior internal systems architect referred to in internal memos only as Cipher, provided comprehensive evidence. This evidence included thousands of pages of encrypted data logs, private communication transcripts, and internal audit reports detailing the calculated, systematic manipulation of global currency rates designed to profit from engineered volatility. The lead prosecuting attorney, Agent Eleanor Vance, a woman known for her meticulous approach and steely resolve, spent 3 weeks reviewing the primary materials. The evidence traced the digital footprint of the manipulation scheme, the algorithms, the timing, and the ultimate beneficiaries to a specific location within the Sterling and Thorne corporate structure. The trail ended at a secure server room on the 48th floor, a vault of dark, polished granite and reinforced steel, known within the firm's IT department simply as Sector 7. Sector 7 was not merely a data center, it was a fortress, climate-controlled to maintain a perpetual 68 degrees Fahrenheit, smelling faintly of ozone and expensive filtration systems. Within its walls, banks of humming servers generated the vast computational power required to execute the complex, high-frequency trades that drove the manipulation scheme. Vance's team had assembled a massive case file, physically manifesting the digital corruption in dozens of heavy, accordion-style file boxes stacked shoulder-high in the federal courthouse basement. The weight of the paper mirrored the weight of the crime. The final administrative step was the service of a subpoena, a legal instrument demanding physical access to Sector 7 for the imaging and seizure of the primary server data, the conclusive backup tapes, and the real-time operational logs. The subpoena documentation was meticulously prepared, ensuring it was legally unassailable and specific enough to prevent any attempt at data destruction or evasion. It was scheduled for delivery at 10 a.m. on a Friday. At 09:17 that same Friday morning, moments before the dedicated Marshal Service unit could leave the building with the sealed subpoena, Agent Vance received a direct, private communication. It was delivered not through email or standard phone line, but by a secured, encrypted satellite transmission routed through a specialized federal channel. The source was a high-ranking executive authority, far above Vance's own supervisory chain, and the contents were chillingly brief. It was an unassailable executive order demanding the complete cessation of review and any further action related to the Sterling and Thorne case, effective immediately. The order cited national economic security concerns and utilized legislative language related to systemic risk that was rarely, if ever, invoked. The document was a legal sledgehammer, crushing the momentum of the inquiry instantly. There was no appeal, no negotiation, and no explanation for the abrupt change in policy. Vance was ordered to sequester all gathered evidence. The immediate aftermath was defined by frantic, silent compliance. Within 48 hours, the voluminous evidence boxes, the culmination of 2 years of forensic accounting and legal strategy, were sealed with tamper-proof federal tape. The heavy cardboard groaned under the weight of the paper trail documenting global financial crimes. These sealed crates were then loaded onto unmarked, climate-controlled trucks and dispatched to a remote federal warehouse facility in a sparsely populated region of the country. A facility known colloquially as the storage graveyard. The legal team was disbanded. The specialized forensic accounts were reassigned. The physical structure of the case was systematically disassembled and relocated, leaving behind only the cold, polished steel of the courthouse floor where the boxes had stood. The ghost of Sector 7, the digital blueprint of global currency manipulation, was extinguished not by defense attorneys, but by the highest echelons of administrative fiat. The financial firm remained untouched. The servers in the granite vault continued to hum, and the silence surrounding the case was thick and suffocating. The final documentation concludes with 2 distinct cold cases, illustrating procedural deadlock. Cases where the investigation did not encounter a political ceiling or catastrophic equipment failure, but rather an arbitrary, bureaucratic wall erected on the ground itself. The first of these deadlocks is the silent witness disappearance, which originated in a decaying Midwest town defined by the relentless cycle of seasonal decay. The town itself was a collage of weathered wood, peeling paint, and damp, compacted earth, frequently blanketed by a heavy, mist-laden air that muted all sound. The subject of the inquiry was a young individual, known only through procedural documentation, who vanished without warning from their modest, isolated farmhouse on a clear October morning. The local sheriff's department, a small unit accustomed to trivial disputes and minor property crimes, was quickly overwhelmed by the efficiency and finality of the disappearance. The initial search effort was intensive, utilizing a small volunteer force and tracking dogs. The terrain was challenging, dense thickets of brush giving way to marshy lowlands, bordered by acres of freshly harvested cornfields where the sharp stubble tore at shoe leather. The most critical piece of evidence was the final discernible trail of footprints. These were small, clear impressions in the dew-dampened earth leading away from the rear door of the farmhouse, crossing a small, newly planted field and skirting the edge of a wooded area. The prints showed a steady, purposeful pace, not a panicked run. The soil in that region was a rich, dark loam, offering clear texture for the tracking experts. They noted the depth and stride length, confirming the identity of the person they were tracking. The pursuit was agonizingly slow, requiring the trackers to mark each step with small colored flags, meticulously mapping the path of the vanished individual. The trail progressed for approximately 3 kilometers, following the meandering course of an ancient creek bed. The trackers were focused entirely on the texture of the soil, the crushed grass blades, and the subtle shifts in the landscape that indicated passage. Then, the trail ended. It ended not in a lake or at a road where the subject could have been picked up, but abruptly, definitively, at a jurisdictional boundary. This boundary was a theoretical, invisible line separating 2 heavily guarded and historically contentious counties. County A, where the investigation began, was under the authority of the Regional Sheriff's Office and standard state law enforcement. County B, just a few feet beyond the last footprint, was the domain of a specialized administrative body responsible for overseeing a massive, sensitive infrastructure project. A massive dam and hydroelectric facility built years prior, shrouded in perpetual, low-level security concern. The boundary itself was manifested physically by a shift in materials and personnel. On the side of County A, the path was bordered by rusty, old barbed wire and a dilapidated wooden sign reading, "Private Property." On the County B side, the ground abruptly changed to precisely maintained, chemically treated gravel, and the fence transitioned to high-tensile, chain-link steel topped with razor wire, patrolled by vehicles painted in a severe, non-standard olive drab. The final footprint, perfectly preserved in the damp loam, stopped just 6 inches shy of the treated gravel. There were no drag marks, no sign of struggle, no indication of a vehicle accelerating away. Only the clean, sharp edge where the natural earth met the administered boundary. Local law enforcement, eager and professionally determined, hit an insurmountable jurisdictional boundary. Requests for access to County B, even for a simple ground search, were met with an immediate official denial, citing critical infrastructure protection protocols and zero-tolerance ingress regulations. The bureaucratic friction was immense. The sheriff of County A had no authority to cross the line, and the security forces of County B had no mandate or interest in investigating an external disappearance, stating that the footprint termination point clearly indicated the subject did not cross into administered territory. The final discernible trail of evidence sat on the administrative line, a silent testament to the subject's fate, yet utterly untouchable. The silent witness investigation dissolved into a frustrating maze of procedural red tape, proving that sometimes the greatest obstacle to truth is not the criminal, but the arbitrary boundary between two heavily guarded bureaucratic entities. The footprints, preserved under a temporary plastic sheet, faced the razor wire, documenting a procedural deadlock that refused to yield. The final case, the Meridian incident, encapsulates the fragility of modern data and the agonizing proximity of success before absolute failure. This inquiry was a high-stakes internal investigation into a massive data breach involving national security profiles stored by a private sector contractor. The goal was forensic retrieval of the final, conclusive backup tapes that would identify the internal architect of the leak and the external recipients of the compromised data. The evidence was housed within the Meridian Data Storage Facility, a sprawling, anonymous structure composed of beige concrete and reflective glass, located deep within an industrial park. The facility was designed to be state-of-the-art, a labyrinth of cold aisles and hot aisles, maintained under the rigorous climate control of continuous air conditioning, the air perpetually smelling of processed air and low-level electrical current. Forensic agents, led by a specialized technical retrieval unit, had secured access after weeks of complex legal maneuvering. Their target was Vault Delta 4, the physical location of the archival magnetic tapes containing the final untouched snapshot of the system configuration hours before the breach was detected. The atmosphere inside the vault was sterile, dominated by the relentless hum of the cooling systems and the subtle whir of the automated tape library arms. The team was methodical. They had spent hours calibrating their specialized retrieval hardware, ensuring minimal electromagnetic interference, and establishing an unbroken chain of custody for the highly sensitive data. The process involved manually extracting the required tapes from the racks, placing them into shielded transport containers, and then loading the data onto their secured imaging stations. They had successfully secured 90% of the target data, documenting the network traffic and firewall penetration paths. All that remained were the conclusive backup tapes, 2 cartridges of high-density storage that contained the login credentials and physical access logs for the specific terminal used to initiate the breach. The forensic technician, seated before the imaging station, reached out a gloved hand to confirm the final tape had been successfully mounted in the reader. It was in that precise moment, the seconds before the system confirmed the read command, that the Meridian incident terminated. Without warning, without fuse-popping crackle or visible arc, the entire facility suffered a catastrophic, unexplained electrical failure. The deep, continuous hum of the climate control systems vanished, replaced by an absolute, terrifying silence. In the sudden darkness, emergency systems should have activated immediately, transferring power seamlessly to the massive battery backups and then to the diesel generators. They did not. Instead, a series of violent internal power spikes, estimated to be several times the normal operating voltage, rocketed through the primary and redundant electrical grids simultaneously. This was not a simple blackout. It was a systemic overload that utterly destroyed every active electronic component it touched. Forensic agents later reported the brief, sharp smell of ozone and burning plastic that hung in the cold, dead air. When the dust settled and external power was restored hours later, the scene inside Vault Delta 4 was one of cold desolation. The servers were melted hulks of twisted metal and scorched circuit boards. The imaging stations were reduced to inert boxes. Crucially, the sensitive magnetic archival tapes, including the 2 conclusive backup cartridges, had been exposed to the chaotic power surge. While the physical tapes remained, attempts to read them yielded only a uniform high-frequency noise. The data had been thoroughly and irreversibly demagnetized, rendered useless by the powerful, unexplained electrical discharge. The conclusive evidence was vaporized in a burst of uncontrolled energy. The official investigation into the cause of the electrical failure was brief and inconclusive, citing unforeseen atmospheric interference and grid instability. A highly dubious explanation, given the facility's dedicated surge protection and triple redundant power systems. The Meridian incident concluded not with a legal order, but with a technological act of violence, freezing the forensic agents within inches of securing the truth, ensuring that the conclusive answers remained forever locked in the silent, demagnetized media. These 5 cases, spanning the suffocating pressure of the abyssal plain, the ancient dust of the desert high plains, the sterile towers of global finance, the damp decay of a jurisdictional boundary, and the high-tech sterility of a server farm, are united by the suddenness of their termination. They represent a specialized category of unresolved truth, investigations that were not abandoned due to a dead end, but actively cut short just as the evidence was about to speak. The deep water anomaly dissolved into a cost-prohibitive ledger entry. The desert cache vanished behind a security fence. The ghost of Sector 7 was sealed in administrative archive boxes. The silent witness was trapped by an unyielding administrative boundary. And the Meridian incident was physically wiped clean by an inexplicable surge of power. Each conclusion leaves the unanswered questions hanging in the stark, administrative silence of the official record, documenting the established facts surrounding these abrupt conclusions, and reaffirming the quiet dread inherent in truth intentionally left unretrieved.